Reality is fragile, layers of code, history, and perception attached together. But what happens when the seams split? When forgotten signals resurface and the familiar becomes something else entirely? Welcome back to Glitch Reality. This is Season 2, Episode 1. What happens when you go searching? From tales from the past, and you don't know what you're going to encounter. That's what this tale is about. I'm not going to go too much into detail, so you can just enjoy the horror. This is Old Gods Don't Rot. I've always had a thing for abandoned religious places. Not in like a blasphemous way, more like a pure fascination. Curiosity about how humans could build monuments to eternity, then forget them in the same generation. So when Riley suggested a road trip to a derelict church out in the Lake District, I didn't hesitate. He found it through some urban exploration subreddit, a place called St. Bridget's Chapel. It was locked up in the 1970s after something happened during a sermon. No one online knew what had happened, just that the congregation vanished and the church was sealed. So we left on a Friday afternoon, escaping screens and work and the constant hum and buzz of the normal life. The further we drove, the more the civilization just melted away from us, from motorways to country lanes to gravel roads, then just mud. We called it the pilgrimage. By the time we parked, the sky was already bristling into twilight. The air felt colder all of a sudden. Not cold, but emptiness cold. We stood there, staring into the stretch of the forest, older than any man-made thing we could even name. "Should be about a mile walk," Riley had said to me, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. A mile? That didn't sound like much. But every step we took into that woodland felt like stepping backwards through time. The path narrowed. The deeper we went, the brambles clawed at our jeans. The trees leaned overhead as if they had grown to block out the sun itself. All silence. No birds. No wind. Just our breathing and the slow crunch of leaves beneath our boots. And then, like a rose out the earth, we saw it. St. Bridget's Chapel. A stone shell with a collapsed roof, arched windows which looked like eye sockets, a graveyard crawling up the hillside behind it. The whole place just kind of slouched, like it had been crushed beneath centuries of grief. Riley grinned. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I don't remember what I answered, but I remember thinking, some things aren't abandoned. They're just left alone. There were 3 entrances to the chapels. The main doors, which were oak, splintered and chained. A side door, rusted iron and sealed shut. And a small vestry door around the back, which was actually slightly ajar. Of course, that's the one that Riley wanted to use. He pushed it with one hand, and it opened. It creaked like something awakening from a long, deep sleep. The smell hit us first. Mold, old paper, and damp wood. And then something sweeter was in the air. Something like rotting fruit. Inside, dust swirled in the air, catching the sliver of moonlight piercing through a hole in the roof. Church pews laid overturned, and a pulpit rotted into splinters from the rafters. A rope hung, frayed, and slightly swinging, but with no wind. I tried to make a joke about ghosts, but Riley was already heading deeper. "Wait," I called out. "Not so fast." He waved his torch around, under the beam until it landed near the altar. Heavy brickwork had surrounded it. Newer than the rest of it, reinforced almost, like something had tried very hard to lock something in. Spray painted across it in big, bold letters was "Do not unlock. The third date is not yours." We both stared. What the hell does that even mean? I asked, and Riley shrugged. Only one way to find out. He tugged the handle. Locked. Padlocked. Padlocked twice. I felt relief. That didn't last long though, because his torch slid over a hatch on the floor, metal with a handle, and with no lock. Riley, he was already pulling it open. As Riley wrenched open that hatch, blackness spilled up from the hole, like smoke. Riley shoved his beam down there. A narrow stone stairway, and at the bottom, shelves, stacked with cassette tapes. Hundreds, maybe thousands. A hand-painted sign hung above the shelves. The words must be remembered. Something deep in me, something very primal, told me that I needed to leave. But instead, I followed Riley down. The ceiling brushed my shoulders. Our boots echoed off the stone floor. We each grabbed a random tape at the bottom. The one I chose had a handwritten label. Homely 14, The Last Seed, 1973, Reverend E. Wren. Riley grinned at me. Plug it into your recorder. You bought a cassette player? I asked. He lifted his camera rig, a retro monstrosity he used for the aesthetics. Of course I did. He slid the tape in and pressed play. A burst of static hit the air, and then a voice, low, rich, and authoritative. Brothers, sisters, do not fear the returning soil, for flesh is the root of the spirit, and dark earth remembers what light forgets. My skin prickled. Riley glanced at me. Creepypasta. Classic. But then the voice continued. Tonight, they plough. The plough will run red. Tonight, the seeds will scream as they are buried and when they rise. But the tape warped. It dragged. And then it resumed. We shall kneel before the God that does not rot. Then came screaming. Multiple voices. A cacophony in agony. We both jumped. And Riley slammed the stop. We both stared at each other and tried to laugh it off. But he did not press play again. Not right away. We ascended back up that stone staircase, back into that main chapel. A bit rattled. The moonlight had shifted. It was now casting a pale spotlight onto the graveyard, visible through a broken wall. We should really head back, I had muttered. But Riley, ever determined, said not yet. There's history here. We've barely seen anything. So he walked out towards the graves through the broken wall. I followed, unwilling but unable to be alone. And every tombstone had 2 dates on it. Birth and death. But where a third date should have been, like some ceremonies and some cemeteries list resurrection symbolism, it was blank. Freshly chiseled blank, though. As if something was missing. Look, Riley had shouted over, as he had knelt by one. This one has writing, so I approached. Eleanor Wren, born 1933, died 1973, awaiting the day of the return. That's the same year as that tape. Riley's torch beamed onto another, same inscription, same years. Every grave, same year and same line. What if, just what if, they all died at once? The forest now had begun to fold in around us like it was watching, listening. And then we saw it. One of the graves had 3 dates carved. Thomas Hale. Born 1944, died 1973, returned 2024. The year wasn't weather-worn either. It wasn't aged. It was new. Freshly carved into that stone. Riley's torch, at that point, begun to flicker. Who would have done that? No answer. But in the woods, we heard a distant voice. Just faintly from the woods, we heard a Amen. Me and Riley had froze. But the word repeated. This time, it got closer. Amen. Not a chant, not joyful, more like a warming spoken through a smile. Riley looked at me and whispered, "Someone's here." So he killed his torch. We crouched behind a tombstone, both breathing shallowly, where footsteps now dragged through leaves, and they were slow and deliberate. Then I saw something, moving far past the tree line, a tall shape, bent at the spine, covered head to toe in thorny branches. Like a scarecrow, carved from a dead henge. It paused at the chapel's edge, sniffing the air, and branches creaked as it turned its head around. Riley's hand reached out and gripped my arm tightly. The thing reached towards the chapel wall, but then stopped. It's as if it couldn't cross the threshold. Stone. It must be the stone. It must have been afraid of stone. So it turned. Leaves crunched beneath naked roots where feet should have been. But then, in the same calm tone from that tape, "Flesh is the root of spirit. The last seed is near." Riley grasped. The creature's head now snapped towards us, and we ran. Me and Riley sprinted back into that chapel. We slammed the vestry door. Riley dragged a pew with all of his might to block it, and we both held our breath. Branches scraped outside, and it was frustrated at the stone itself, you could tell. And then there was silence. Riley, breathing heavily, just says to me, "What the hell was that?" But I didn't answer. I couldn't answer, because something else had caught my eye. There was a pedestal near the altar, and a single cassette tape had sat upon it. And unlike the others, this tape wasn't marked by dust, wasn't marked from years of aging. It was pristine. Perfect. Like it was new. And the label read, Homily 15, The Returned, Reverend T. Hale. Thomas Hale. The grave that had the third date. My hands began to shake. Don't, as Riley began to reach towards it. And then he pushed the tape in anyway. And pressed play. Silence ran through the area, but then footsteps, heavy, crunching through leaves. But all we heard was the cassette playing through. The preacher was speaking. "The last of the living have arrived. You walk where we walk, yet you deny the roots beneath your feet." I begin to feel my world start to tilt. Do not fear the returned. Your third day awaits you. The earth is still hungry. And then the tape cut out. The last of the living. And it repeats. The last of the living. And again. The last of the living. That line repeated again and again. And then a different line started to repeat. Your third date awaits. Your third date awaits. Riley reached to stop it, but the tape somehow ejected itself. And then the lights of the chapel started to flicker. Real or imaginary, I don't know, but above us, from the rafters, a low, groaning rope. The frayed noose now swung like a metronome. Tick, tock, tick, tock. But the sermon wasn't over. With great haste, Riley grabbed my jacket. Move, now! We bolted out through the broken window into the graveyard, landing hard into wet grass. But now the forest wasn't silent. It was breathing. Deep, slow, and wet. Roots squirmed through the soil. Graves now creaked. The earth shifted like it had swallowed something still alive, and it was still trying to rise. Riley turns to me and yells, "Head for the car. Do not look back. Just head for the car." But we didn't get far. A root, thick as my arm, exploded from the ground and coiled around Riley's ankle. He screamed and fell backward, clawing at the dirt. I grabbed his hand and I pulled. My God, I pulled, but the root only tightened. Dragged him towards an open grave. Soil poured around him as he sank. His voice split into pure terror. "Don't let go! Please, don't let go!" I pulled harder, skin tearing, but the earth wouldn't give him back. Riley locked eyes with me. "Don't let them bury me." He was waist deep by now, dirt swallowing him. Please. And then silence. His mouth was buried. His fingers vanished. And his nail scraping across my skin had stopped. He was all gone. St. Bridget's graveyard ate my best friend. And the soil settled flat, like it was never there. The chapel bell tower shook. A voice, not from speakers, not from earth, but inside my skull. One seed planted, now one remains. So I ran. I don't remember how I found that trail again. Branches tore my face and my clothes, but I didn't feel anything except the one need I had, and that was to escape. I burst from the woods onto a muddy track where we had parked, but the car wasn't there. Not stolen. Just in the wrong fucking road. I had run in the wrong direction. Behind me, the forest bulged outwards. Roots writhing beneath leaves, getting closer. I sprinted again, nearly, blindly. Hours or minutes, I saw headlamps cutting through the dark. A passerby, a hiker, a camper, it didn't matter. I staggered into the road, waving my arms, screaming. The car stopped. A man climbed out. Older, weathered, wearing a reflective jacket. "Are you alright though?" I collapsed into him. He drove me down the road to a small ranger station, safe, brightly lit, full of radios and paperwork, and a calming lie of almost normality. Then he gave me tea and a blanket and asked what had happened, and I told him everything. All of it. They listened with the kind of patience people reserve for the traumatized or delusional. The police came, they sent teams dispatched, drones, dogs. And what do you think they found? No church, no cemetery, no Hatch, no Riley, and the woods were untouched. Just trees and silence. One officer even suggested that I had had a psychotic break and asked about drugs. A third told me gently that maybe I just imagined Riley. And then I left that next day, a changed person entirely. I went back home and I tried to go back to normal. Work, sleep, pretending Riley never existed. Except his WhatsApp chat had vanished. His photos gone, his posts deleted. Like he had never been online. I cried every day for 2 nights straight. And he was still there. He was still in my mind. But then, last week, something came through my letterbox. A thick cream envelope, no stamp, no address. Inside, there was a single cassette tape with a handwritten label. It said, "The Last of the Living," had my full name and this year. And I stared at it. It felt like I had stared at it for a whole hour. Shaking, I finally inserted it into a cassette player and pressed play. But the voice wasn't the preacher this time. It wasn't Riley. It was me. The recording quality was perfect. And I said on that tape, born 1995, died 2025. Returned soon. But then that tape clicked off. And that was it. The next morning, I woke up and there was dirt underneath my fingernails. There was soil on my sheet and mud on my carpet. And I don't sleep anymore. Not really. I sink. I wake up gasping, the taste of earth in my throat. I tell myself it is just trauma. It is just nightmares. It's my brain trying to cope. But sometimes I hear roots crawling underneath the floorboard. I hear choirs muffled by soil. I hear Riley's nails scratching wood louder and louder every single night. And then, when I came home today, on my table, there was a stone. It was carved. My name, my birthday, and a blank space beneath it, waiting for the third date, waiting for me itself. St. Bridget's stands still somewhere out there, hidden and hungry, and I still hear the earth calling. Flesh is the root of spirit, and the dark earth remembers when light forgets. They didn't disappear in 1973. They planted themselves. Riley was the first seed. And soon, I'm going to be the last. The soil will not take me back, because the God that claimed them does not rot. Thank you very much for listening to Season 2, Episode 1 of Glitch Reality. Yes, I am back, and I know it has been a while. I am going to get you weekly episodes from now on. I really appreciate you tuning in. And as always, keep an eye on that glitch, because sometimes the glitch is true.